On the 1st of September 2008, everything changed. Not just for Manchester City, for English football, for the entire sport. A member of the Abu Dhabi royal family, one of the richest men on the planet, walked into Manchester and wrote a cheque for £200 million. And within hours, on the same afternoon, Manchester City signed Robinho from Real Madrid for £32.5 million. A British transfer record, done in an afternoon. The club that had won nothing of note since 1976. The club whose fans spent decades watching their neighbours across the city collect trophy after trophy. The club that was a punchline. In one afternoon, they became the richest club on earth. What followed over the next 15 years was the most extraordinary transformation in the history of English football. 8 Premier League titles, a Champions League, 9 League Cups. The most dominant force this country has ever seen. But here's the question that the most powerful independent legal panel ever assembled in football history has been trying to answer for 16 months. Was any of it real? Because if the answer is no, the financial consequences are so catastrophic, so unprecedented, so utterly devastating that this verdict could destroy everything Manchester City have built. And it's coming. Any day now. To actually understand what's at stake, you need to understand where City came from. Before Mansour, Manchester City's transfer record was £13 million. 13 million. That was the ceiling. In the summer of 2009, just 1 year after the takeover, City spent over £100 million on players in a single window. Gareth Barry, Emmanuel Adebayor, Carlos Tevez, Kolo Touré, Joleon Lescott. 100 million in one summer from a club whose previous record was 13 million. The signal was clear. There was no ceiling anymore. By December 2009, Roberto Mancini was appointed as manager. In 2011, City won the FA Cup, their first major trophy in 35 years. And then came the moment that defined an era. May 13th, 2012. Injury time. Manchester City need a goal to win the Premier League on goal difference. Sergio Aguero receives the ball from Balotelli in the box and strikes home. The Etihad erupts as the ball hit the net. The most dramatic title win in the history of English football. 44 years without a league championship, gone in a moment. Commentator Martin Tyler screaming Aguero became the defining sound of a new era in English football. A city that had lived in its neighbour's shadow for a generation finally had something to shout about. And it was just the beginning. 2014, Premier League title. 2016, League Cup. 2018, 100 points. A record that may never be broken. A record that signalled to the rest of English football, you can't compete with us anymore. Pep Guardiola arrived in 2016 and turned a very good team into the most dominant force in a generation. 4 Premier League titles in 5 years. A Champions League in 2023, back-to-back titles. An empire. But empires need foundations, and it's the foundations of this one that are currently being examined in extraordinary detail by 3 of the most senior legal minds in the country. Here's what most people don't fully understand about why we're here. When Sheikh Mansour bought City in 2008, UEFA were in the process of introducing something called financial fair play. Simple idea. A club cannot spend significantly more than it earns. An owner cannot just pour unlimited money in. The whole point was to stop exactly what Mansour was doing. And here's the problem that City faced. Mansour wanted to pour hundreds of millions in. FFP said he couldn't. The money had to look like it came from somewhere legitimate. So here's what is alleged to have happened. In July 2011, Manchester City announced one of the most extraordinary sponsorship deals in the history of sport. A 10-year partnership with Etihad Airways. Stadium naming rights, shirt sponsorships, everything. At the time, Arsenal's shirt deal was worth 30 million a year. Liverpool's was 20 million a year. Manchester City's Etihad deal worked out at approximately £67.5 million a year. Arsene Wenger, no fan of spending at the best of times, immediately said it publicly. It raises a real question about the credibility of financial fair play. He called it financial doping. And here's the thing about Etihad Airways that matters enormously to this story. Etihad Airways is owned by the Abu Dhabi government, the same Abu Dhabi government whose royal family owns Manchester City. In other words, the sponsorship deal that City were using to demonstrate they were generating legitimate commercial income was being paid by the same people who own the club. Now, City say that the deal was genuine, independently valued, and commercially justifiable. Etihad's CEO has publicly denied paying anything above market rate. But Football Leaks tells a different story. In November 2018, a Portuguese hacker named Rui Pinto, who had spent years obtaining and leaking internal documents from football clubs all across Europe, handed thousands of Manchester City documents to the German newspaper Der Spiegel. And what those documents appeared to show was devastating. An internal email from 2011 showed that City had invoiced Etihad for £12 million for shirt sponsorship of that year. But the invoice had a handwritten annotation. Etihad only needed to pay £4 million. The remaining £8 million was to be handled separately by the UAE Executive Affairs Authority. The UAE Executive Affairs Authority is effectively the Abu Dhabi government. A consultant's report written for the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi in 2010, which was later leaked to the Australian Financial Review, noted under a list of Etihad sponsorships, Executive Council covers Man City. The Executive Council is the Abu Dhabi governing body. In plain English, the allegation is this: Etihad wasn't paying the sponsorship. The Abu Dhabi government was. And by labelling it as commercial sponsorship income, City would be able to book it as legitimate revenue, and then spend it freely without breaching FFP. City called the leaked documents hacked and out of context. They denied everything. But the Premier League had seen enough to investigate, and in December 2018, they did. 4 years of investigations followed, and what the Premier League found went far beyond the sponsorship deals. Roberto Mancini, the man who gave Manchester City their soul back, the manager who delivered the first title in 40 years, the man the Etihad still sings about. His official City salary during his 4 years as manager was £1.45 million per year. Except, it wasn't. Football Leaks revealed that Mancini had a second contract, a consultancy agreement with Al Jazeera, an Abu Dhabi football club also owned by, you guessed it, Sheikh Mansour. Al Jazeera were paying Mancini £1.75 million per year, more than City were officially paying him, for just 4 days of work a year. And here's the money trail that makes this extraordinary. City would pay funds to ADUG, the Abu Dhabi United Group, Mansour's holding company. ADUG would forward the money to Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera would pay a company called Italy International Services, effectively Mancini's company, which would then pay Mancini. The money ended up in a shell company in Mauritius called Sparkle Glow Holdings. Let that sink in. Sparkle Glow Holdings in Mauritius. And the Mancini Al Jazeera contract, the document itself, contained this line: neither you, your company, nor the club shall, without the prior written consent of the other, disclose the existence or the terms of these heads of agreement to any third party. A secrecy clause written into the contract about a contract that was itself allegedly designed to conceal how much City were actually paying their manager. In plain English, City were paying Mancini double what they declared. Half his salary was hidden in a shell company in Mauritius via an Abu Dhabi football club that required 4 days of work a year. And Mancini isn't alone. Similar allegations surround image rights arrangements for Yaya Toure and other players during the same period. The Premier League alleged that the undisclosed payment arrangements were a pattern. not an accident. City deny all of it. In February 2023, after 4 years of investigation, the Premier League formally charged Manchester City. 115 charges. Let's break down what that actually means, because this is where most coverage loses people. The charges fall into 5 categories. 54 charges are providing inaccurate financial information, the Etihad angle, inflating commercial revenues by allegedly disguising owner investment as sponsorship income. 9 seasons from 2009 to 2018. 14 charges of failing to disclose full details of payments to players and managers, the Mancini angle, the Torre angle, hidden compensation structures. 5 charges of breaching UEFA's own FFP rules during the same period. 7 charges of breaching the Premier League's own profit and sustainability rules between 2015 and 2018, and 35 charges, the ones that could be the most damaging to City's defence, for failing to cooperate with the Premier League's investigation, refusing to provide original documents, disputing disclosure orders, bringing repeated procedural challenges for 4 years. 115. Some legal experts say that the actual underlying breach count is closer to 130. A 12-week hearing ran from September to December 2024 at London's International Dispute Resolution Centre. Over 500,000 pieces of evidence. 20 plus witnesses, including former City CEO Ferran Soriano. The most complex governance case in the history of English football. And since December 2024, silence. 16 months. No verdict. Both the Premier League and Manchester City have confirmed that they've received zero official update from the panel. Now, before we talk about what happens if City lose, you need to understand why they might not. Because they've been here before. In February 2020, UEFA banned Manchester City from European football for 2 years and fined them €30 million, the most severe punishment in the history of club football governance. By July 2020, the ban was gone, and the fine was reduced to just £10 million. City hired Lord Panic KC, one of the most eminent barristers in England, a crossbench peer who has argued landmark cases before the UK Supreme Court and the European Court of Human Rights. The man who represented Gina Miller against the UK government. The man who represented Boris Johnson in the prorogation case. They deployed him against UEFA at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne. And he dismantled the case. The CAS ruled the key emails were time-barred, too old to be admissible, that the evidence had been taken out of context. City didn't just win, they exposed structural weaknesses in UEFA's entire regulatory framework. Lord Panic is also leading City's defence in the Premier League case too. And in October 2024, before the main verdict had even landed, City won a separate legal battle against the Premier League's associated party transaction rules. The tribunal declared those rules unlawful, a significant concession from the league. City insist that they have irrefutable evidence and they've done nothing wrong. Pep Guardiola has maintained throughout that the club will be cleared. One legal commentator noted that City's lawyers may be licking their lips at certain precedents set during Chelsea's own financial investigation. The probability of full acquittal, legal experts put it between 50 and 25%, which means the probability of some form of guilty verdict is somewhere between 75 and 85%. So let's talk about what this actually costs, because this is Sports Cash Files, and the numbers are where this story gets absolutely extraordinary. Manchester City's revenue in the 2024-25 season was £694 million, the highest of any Premier League club. Here's what different verdicts actually mean financially. Scenario 1. If City are found guilty and receive a 40 to 60 point deduction. Applied to the current season, City would be mathematically relegated regardless of their on-field position. They currently sit second in the Premier League. A 60-point deduction from their current tally makes them bottom of the table. Relegation means loss of Premier League distributions. approximately 100 to 150 million pounds. Champions League qualification will be lost, another 50 to 80 million pounds. Commercial partners will renegotiate, sponsors will pull back, and transfer values will collapse. One finance expert estimated the total financial impact of relegation on a club the size of City is somewhere between 300 and 500 million pounds over 2 years. Then there's title stripping. During the charge period, City won the league in 2012, 2014, and 2018. If those titles are stripped and reallocated, Arsenal would be awarded the 2014 title and Liverpool the 2018 title. And here's something that no one is talking about. Other clubs. The clubs that finished second behind City during those seasons. The clubs that missed out on Champions League qualification. The clubs that lost commercial value because City were spending money that they allegedly shouldn't have had. Under Premier League rules, those clubs could launch legal claims for loss of chance damages. They could argue City's alleged breaches caused them direct financial harm. Multiple clubs, multiple claims, legal proceedings that could run for years. Scenario 2. If City are found guilty but receive a moderate sanction. Points deductions of 10 to 20 points applied to a future season. A substantial fine, no title stripping, and City will stay in the league. The case grinds through appeals into 2027 or 2028. The financial hit is still enormous. Hundreds of millions in legal costs, commercial uncertainty, reputational damage that takes years to repair. But the empire survives. Scenario 3. If City are fully acquitted. They walk free. The Premier League's entire FFP enforcement framework is exposed as effectively unenforceable against clubs with sufficient financial and legal resources. Every ambitious owner in world football will take note. The financial arms race will accelerate. English football changes direction permanently. Here's the uncomfortable truth that sits at the heart of the entire story. Manchester City have been the greatest team in English football for a decade. Aguero's goal, Guardiola's 100-point season, the treble, moments that genuinely belong in the history of the sport. But the charges against them don't just question whether they broke financial rules. If the most serious allegations are proven, the ones about disguising owner investment as sponsorship, the shell companies, the secret contract, this becomes a question of whether the entire foundation of the empire was built on deception. The verdict is coming. It's days away, possibly this week. And when it lands, it will be either the greatest exoneration in football history or the most devastating verdict that the sport has ever seen. Either way, the financial consequences will reshape English football for a generation. I want to know what you think. Guilty or not guilty? Drop it in the comments. And when the verdict actually lands, come back and see how close we got. If you enjoyed this video, a like genuinely helps the channel reach more screens. Subscribe to Sports Cash Files. Every week, we dig into financial stories behind the biggest moments in sport. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.